show starts right now.
In the NFL, see the handwriting on the wall. Melvin Gordon, Ezekiel Elliott, they want to get paid. They see exactly what the NFL thinks of their second and third contracts. They see exactly how they get used and dismissed. So if you're a top NFL running back, if your name's Melvin Gordon, if your name's Ezekiel Elliott, if your name's Saquon Barkley, how long until you hold out? How long until the New York Giants have to deal with Saquon Barkley's contract? It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio, the ESPN app, SiriusXM Channel 80, and on ESPN News, presented by Progressive Insurance. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on all those same ESPN outlets. Coming up on today's show, if I give you a 3-year window and I ask, which teams in the NFL have the best shot to win it all? Which teams do you like over the next 3 years? ESPN.com power ranked the entire league over a 3-year window, and I'll let you know where your favorite team came in. But it's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. How long until Saquon Barkley holds out in New York? I don't ask that question because I'm trying to cause a controversy, because I'm trying to get into anybody's skin, because I'm trying to act like there's something to be seen when everything is copacetic in New York. I ask that question because it's coming. If you look at what's going on in the NFL right now, if you look at the running backs who are either holding out or rumored to soon be holding out, what you see is a clear message from the league and in turn by running backs. The message from the league is that running backs are interchangeable. That no matter how great you are, there's a sentiment that teams can get some semblance, some percentage of your production at some reduced cost. That we can find our James Conner to your Le'Veon Bell. Running backs, notoriously, when you look across the tables, the statistical and actuarial tables tail off at about the age of 24, 25. Running backs tail off right about the time they get that second contract. And that makes the NFL wonder, why do we pay for what they've done in the past? Why do we pay for right when the position tails off? Louis Riddick, ESPN NFL front office insider, was on Go Look Wingo where he talked about this exact sentiment across the league.
We know that those guys are looked at like new automobiles when you drive them off the car lot. Their value depreciates immediately. Their value is never higher than what it is when you're drafted number 1 overall, or rather first round overall, and then you start taking NFL hits. It just starts to decrease from there. And I think teams know that. Teams see how you're able to get acceptable production from a percentage basis from guys who require much less in terms of compensation relative to what a franchise guy would require. And they're looking to go that route. They're going with the cheaper options now.
So if teams are going with cheaper options, if they're looking to replace running backs right when they get expensive, isn't that going to in turn force running backs to push their contract windows forward? Isn't that going to in turn force running backs to ask for more money when they're the most valuable? Now, it's Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. Any of you who have listened to me on the Will Cain Show or perhaps seen me on First Take know I'm not a lawyer in any way except by education, and I do have my bar license, but I haven't practiced law. But I do remember this from contracts law back at the University of Texas, and it's an old maxim that contracts are made to be broken. Now, look, set aside the moral argument. Set aside the concept that my word is my bond, that a handshake and some eye contact seal a deal. I believe in all those moral concepts. But when it comes to business, we have to understand the environment in which we're operating. Not everybody believes spitting in your hand seals a deal. Not everybody believes we should operate like John Wayne in the Alamo, ensuring that Davy Crockett and his forces will be there to back you up. Not everybody believes that is how business operates. and they shouldn't, because contracts legally are made to be broken. What I mean by that is there's mechanisms. They're not bonds. They are promises, and it's designed to get the most efficient business out of a relationship. What if the relationship is no longer equitable? What I mean by that is this. Saquon Barkley makes $8 million a year for the New York Giants. Is he more valuable than $8 million a year? The answer is yes. Is Ezekiel Elliott more valuable than $6 million a year to the Dallas Cowboys? He, rightfully, thinks the answer is yes. Running backs put in years of service, hard years of service, at times when they are underpaid. And when it comes time to actually get paid by the end of their contract, we see that increasingly the league is saying no. And nobody is doing anything wrong. Everybody is doing what incentive and business asks of them. And if an NFL team sees that running backs tail off by the time that you pay them their second contract, and we know that just last year, 6 of your 10 highest paid running backs in the league missed time. Teams are doing what is right for them by declining to pay top dollar for a running back, by looking for cheaper options. So wouldn't a running back who is underpaid according to his ability and his services at the same time look to say, I want to go ahead and get paid? That's what Ezekiel Elliott is doing. That's what Melvin Gordon is doing. And by the way, I think they are in different situations. They are not in the same situation. A few days ago here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain filling in, we asked, is Melvin Gordon an elite running back? He is not. Ezekiel Elliott is. Melvin Gordon, over his first 4 years in the league, has one 1,000-yard season. It's also the only season in his 4 years in the league where he played a 16-game schedule. He rushed for 1,100 yards that season. He's a decent receiving back out of the backfield, but we're talking about 50-some-odd receptions. We're not talking about Le'Veon Bell-type numbers. Melvin Gordon is a good running back. He might even be a great running back, but he is not an elite running back. And Louis Riddick, again, ESPN NFL front office insider, was on this show yesterday with me where he said there's a funny little stat you should remember when it's talking about Melvin Gordon and his ability to negotiate a new deal with the Chargers.
If you're Chargers management too, Will, you're looking back at last year, and although obviously every game has its own specific context, they won every game that Melvin didn't start and play in last year. They were 4-0. So when you have those kind of things working against your leverage as the player, it just doesn't bode well in terms of you getting that record-breaking, not record-breaking, but that upper echelon contract, which in the case of running backs, we're looking at that $13-14 million a year.
That upper echelon, though, would include Ezekiel Elliott of the Dallas Cowboys. He's been in the league for 3 years, and 2 of those 3 years he's led the league in rushing. He's only been out for suspension, and he's rushed for 1,600 yards and 1,400 yards over those seasons. And last year, by the way, he caught 77 passes. Ezekiel Elliott has a different hand to play than does Melvin Gordon. Who gets paid? Melvin Gordon, Ezekiel Elliott? The odds are it's Ezekiel Elliott. And not just because of his production, but because of where he is in the contract window, taking us back to when is a contract to be broken? Ezekiel Elliott holding out, potentially, as rumors suggest and reports from Pro Football Talk's Mike Florio, Ezekiel Elliott could potentially do this season with the Dallas Cowboys, is cashing in or trying to renegotiate his contract when his value is at its highest. He's further away from that second contract window. He's further away from that age of 25. He's 23. Melvin Gordon is 26. He's further away from that statistical tail-off we see over and over again with NFL running backs. And Bobby Carpenter, ESPN's football analyst, was on Get Up where he said, yeah, Zeke might just get paid.
I'm not a big proponent of paying running backs, and I think this is why Zeke understands that. That's why he's holding out now, because Dak needs him at this stage in his career to still be able to have that type of success for their offense. If he chooses to wait till next year, he may be in the same situation that Melvin Gordon is. You talked about the window. Zeke sees it closing. It's time for me to try to get my money and not wait till another year till they'll have me pressed and they can use the option and potentially 2 more franchise tags.
Zeke has leverage. Melvin Gordon has less. Zeke's looking to break the contract where he is underpaid, and we have seen that in every sport. We certainly see it in the NBA, where contracts are no indication of where a player might be playing over the next several seasons. Paul George demands a trade 1 year into a 4-year deal. Anthony Davis with 2 years left on his deal. Across the NBA, we saw players force moves when they were contracted to a team for years to come. And in the NFL, we're seeing running backs looking to get paid in the middle of their contract because the one down the road that you hope to cash in on is increasingly less likely to happen. So I will ask you the question that I started with. When does Saquon Barkley begin his holdout? Zeke after his 3rd year. Saquon just finished his 1st year. I'm telling you down the road, if this is the continuing trend, that running backs respond to the market, respond to the league with asking for new contracts earlier. Don't be surprised when a top running back like Saquon Barkley pushes it up earlier and earlier into his tenure. That's Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. ESPN.com has a ranking up of the top teams over the next 3 years. Who's got the best window to compete for a title? ESPN NFL insider Field Yates joins me now. Field, what are you doing to me? You have the Cowboys 14th in your future power rankings, taking a look at the best teams over the next 3 seasons. How are they that low? Explain yourself, Field.
Well, first of all, it was a collaborative effort, so I don't want to take all the credit or face all the criticism for those future power rankings, Will. But what I will say is that the Cowboys right now are better than the 14th best team in the NFL. But as we know, no team is facing a larger, more looming cap situation than the Cowboys with all the stars that they need to pay. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, and Ezekiel Elliott are the most immediate contracts that require attention, but guys like Jalen Smith, Byron Jones, or just a number of other players that will also need to be paid. So the question is going to be, how do the Cowboys navigate that scenario while also being able to keep most of the core? Not all of it, because eventually you're going to have to let guys depart in free agency, but most of it, because if they can, they've got a much better case than being 14th in the NFL.
ESPN NFL front office insider Field Yates here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain filling in. Field, along with Louis Riddick and Kevin Seifert, have a ranking up over the next 3 years of NFL teams and their power rankings across the league. I do take some exception to the Dallas Cowboys being ranked 14th, mostly because, as they acknowledge, their roster is really good. And the problems you're talking about, Field, are good problems to have. How do we hang on to the level of talent we've accumulated? But one place I agree with you, man, is you give value to roster, quarterback coaching, front office, etc. You have the Dallas Cowboys ranked 31st in coaching. Jason Garrett certainly, I believe, over the last almost decade has earned that kind of confidence. But I wanted to ask you this, man, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit later on the Stephen A. Smith Show. If you could have any coach in the league, Field, not named Bill Belichick, who would you pick to have over the next 3 years?
For the next 3 years, I'd go with Sean Payton. And I know that there are some compelling cases for coaches like Andy Reid. Sean McVay would certainly be in the conversation. You could look at the accolades of a variety of coaches that have either won Super Bowls or come close. But my answer is Sean Payton for the reason that I think that orchestrating an offense, he is about as good as there is in the NFL. I think he's an awesome in-game manager as well. And I think that Sean, having been around for so long, has shown that while he has offensive chops, that's his background, he's got full control of a roster and understanding the ins and outs of both defense and also special teams. So Sean Payton would be my pick if I had to choose one besides Bill Belichick. But I wouldn't push back too hard if you told me you were voting for someone like Sean McVay or Andy Reid.
Yeah, I think we should acknowledge who's probably in that debate after Belichick. It is Sean Payton, Sean McVay, Andy Reid. I would also guess that many would put Pete Carroll in the conversation. NFL.com ranked their top coaches across the league field, and those were their top 5. They picked Pete Carroll as the quarterback, or rather the coach, to come in right after Bill Belichick.
Yeah, Pete's got an impressive resume as well. Now, part of the thing to keep in mind for these future power rankings is a 3-year snapshot. So that's factored into both Pete Carroll and also Jason Garrett for different reasons. Jason Garrett is entering the final year of his current contract with the Cowboys. It's pretty uncommon for coaches to coach into the final year of their contract. Oftentimes, what instead happens is an extension is reached, as Jerry Jones made clear at the beginning of the offseason. He's comfortable with Jason Garrett coaching out the final year of his contract, but that at least introduces the possibility of change. And with Pete Carroll, although he is incredible with his energy and his youthful exuberance at the age of, I believe, 67, there are still some that wonder how many more years is he going to continue to do this at the NFL level. It may be that he is very much on the final few years of his coaching career.
Let's stay on the Seahawks for a moment. Talking to ESPN NFL insider Field Yates here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. In this 3-year window power ranking, there are two teams, Field, that I think you and Seifert and Riddick overranked, gave a little bit too much credit. And I want to push back on you and see what you have to say. One is the Seahawks. Okay. You guys have the Seahawks at 5th over the next 3 years. And they do have some things to give them confidence, give you confidence in them. That is, they have Russell Wilson, they have Pete Carroll, they have a good front office. But they also have a roster that I think has serious questions about it. It's a roster that has not won its division, at least not last year, and I thought got handled pretty easily in the playoffs by the Cowboys. What is it about the future for the Seahawks that looks brighter to you than where they've been in the present, essentially?
You know, Will, I'm not sure any team has seen more talent depart over the past 2 off seasons than the Seahawks. Guys like Richard Sherman, guys like Earl Thomas this past off season, players that were hallmark players on a championship roster and a team that went to the Super Bowl in back-to-back years are gone. And yet the Seahawks never ended up rebuilding. They just retooled. They reloaded. And so a lot of these future power rankings is the belief in the infrastructure that let's say the Seahawks lose somebody else amongst her. I think the Seahawks have done a pretty admirable job of that. If you look at some of the guys that were at no point during the Legion of Boom's peak, the players we were talking about, that they have found utility out of. They've been able to replace some of the key members in that secondary. They've been able to rebuild that defensive line, and you're seeing players like Jaron Reed, for example, who has gone from a second-round pick that was viewed as just a run stuffer to maybe a legit $10 or $12 million per year defensive tackle if a new contract is reached at some point here for him soon. So I just believe in the people that are running the show out there in Seattle, and the quarterback is really good. As we talk about often, Russell Wilson gives you a chance every single Sunday.
You know, what's funny is I feel like the second team I felt was overrated in your cumulative power rankings over the next 3 years as well might have a similar analysis. I might end up hearing the same things from you about infrastructure and talent replacement, but I am surprised to see the Pittsburgh Steelers come in at number 6. Now, here's the deal, Field. I believe people have thrown dirt on the Steelers entirely too early. They've anointed the Browns entirely too early. That being said, how you describe the Seahawks as a roster in transition, or they've seen talent leave Seattle. We've seen the same thing in Pittsburgh. We've seen talent leave Pittsburgh, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. So for them to come in at number 6, is that the same thing? You're telling me you believe in their ability to replace that kind of talent in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think certainly there. I mean, no one has drafted wide receivers better than Kevin Colbert of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the number of players that he's found, not even in round 1, that have become really talented wideouts in the NFL is ridiculous. Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown, obviously Juju Smith-Schuster, Martavis Bryant was a 4th-round pick who was very good when he was actually able to be on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there's hope in guys like James Washington this year. Can they find something in Dante Moncrief that they signed in free agency? I like the people that have been running the show there for a long time and their ability to continue to replace key pieces. For the Steelers, though, one thing I will say here, Will, is that, it's been a while since they have not just, it's one thing to reach the AFC Championship game as they did 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago, but it's another thing to be the best team in the AFC. So there's a case that the Steelers need to kind of up the ante a little bit here, and I'm not sure it gets any easier with the division that I know you referenced. Maybe it's too soon to be crowning the Browns, if anything, but the Browns have certainly made noted strides this offseason. It's going to be a much more difficult, path ahead for the Steelers this year as compared to where it may have been in previous seasons.
ESPN NFL front office insider Field Yates, or rather NFL insider Field Yates, here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Hey, man, so Melvin Gordon wants an extension or a trade. There are rumblings now that Ezekiel Elliott may not show up for training camp unless he has a new contract in Dallas. Do you think these two running backs are A, in the same position field, and B, going to get paid?
No, I don't think they are, Will. I don't think they're in the same position, is what I would say. I start there. Production-wise, both have had outstanding numbers. I do think that they're in two different classes, though. I believe that Ezekiel Elliott is a notch above Melvin Gordon. And I think that if you look at how the offenses have run during the apex of their respective careers over the past 3 seasons, Melvin Gordon had sort of a forgettable rookie season with the Chargers. It's clear that the Cowboys offense has operated through Ezekiel Elliott. We saw the impact of him not being there when he had a 6-game suspension he served, and the team's offense looked dramatically different. He has more leverage from an on-field perspective. However, he is in a position, as we talked about a little bit earlier, where there are so many other Cowboys that need to get paid that even if he wants something in the range of $15 million per year, the Cowboys may say, we simply cannot at this point. We've got too many other deals that are coming due sooner than that we need to take care of those first. So I think that Zeke has the better resume, but I'm not sure that he has as much leverage for his respective team. I still think that Gordon probably is going to have a hard time getting a deal that he wants, but I think they're kind of in different buckets.
I told you that Field Yates, Louis Riddick, and Kevin Seifert have the Seahawks at 5, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 6 to round out their top 10 of teams over the next 3 years. Power ranked across the NFL, the Los Angeles Chargers come in at 10th, the Cleveland Browns at 9th, the Los Angeles Rams at 8th, the New Orleans Saints at 7, and jumping up to the Kansas City Chiefs at 4, the Philadelphia Eagles at 3, New England Patriots at 2, and the Indianapolis Colts as the number 1 team over the next 3 years. My one last question for you, Field Yates, is this. It always happens in the NFL. Somebody jumps out of nowhere. We often see worst to first stories when it comes to division titles. And I think Super Bowl contenders often spring up quickly and out of nowhere, like the Chicago Bears over the last year or so. If there's one team that's not in your top 10 that you might keep your eye on, that could surprise everybody, that we should make sure to watch, who would that be?
Take a look here one more time. Did we mention? I got to pull the list back up here, Will. Did we mention the Atlanta Falcons in the top 10? Because if not, that's a team that I think merits some consideration here in the top 10. This is great radio here, not knowing my own ranking 1 through 10.
You have the Falcons at 15th, and I think that's a great nomination, by the way. Yeah,
perfect. And that's a team that has enough talent to be really, really successful this year. Keeping it all together beyond this season is interesting. They got to pay Julio Jones. They got to pay Deion Jones. They just paid Grady Jarrett. But for 2019, you better believe the Atlanta Falcons are going to be a force to be reckoned with.
All right. ESPN NFL insider Field Yates on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. Thanks, Field.
Thanks, Will.
All right. There's Field Yates, brought to you by the new Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. Yesterday, when we were hanging out together here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, I had a caller call in and say the NFC East was the worst division in the NFL. That's ridiculous. I'll tell you the worst division, and I'll tell you this. It doesn't have a single Super Bowl contender in the entire division. That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain filling in. Hey, when you're hiring, you don't want to waste time sorting through dozens of irrelevant resumes. You want an efficient way to get a short list of qualified candidates. That's why you need Indeed.com. Post a job in minutes, set up screener questions based on your job requirements, then zero in on qualified candidates using an intuitive online dashboard. Discover why 3 million businesses use Indeed for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. Search for greatness. Search for Indeed. Nature Valley sweet and salty bars are the indulgent break you deserve in your day. Have you tried the dark chocolate, peanut, and almond flavor? Now that's a sit on the dock and take a moment kind of... We might be watching something that we can say has never happened, which is not just the best and not just the second best, but the 3 best to ever do it go head to head. Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic squared off in the finals of Wimbledon yesterday in an over 6-hour match, the first in history to go to a tiebreaker at 12 games apiece. And Novak Djokovic beat Roger Federer in that Wimbledon final, taking his Grand Slam total up to 16. He trails Rafael Nadal, who has 18, who trails Roger Federer, who has 20. It's the three highest totals, 20, 18, and 16, of any player to ever play the game. These three are the three best to ever do it. Whoever else you want to put into the conversation comes in a distant fourth. Pete Sampras with 14 Grand Slams. What I'm telling you is we're watching something unprecedented. Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. But now you can't have that discussion because it's clear that Tiger Woods is one of the greatest golfers, if not the greatest golfer of all time. Messi and Ronaldo are the two greatest soccer players of all time, but you have to stop at a duo. You can't find a third member who is trading punches here, haymakers, back and forth like Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. You can't find it. Best I can look, in the 1980s, you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, and Marvin Hagler. There was four. And in their weight class, they're certainly all four in the top 50 greatest boxers of all time. And that's according to ESPN's ranking. But the greatest of all time, you got to talk about Ali. And in the 70s, you did have Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman. That was one hell of a battle between those three. But are we talking about the three greatest of all time? Ali won that. Ali is clearly the greatest of all time. Again, you go back in golf history, you can start finding times when you had two guys trading it back and forth, like Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen, Ben Hogan and Sam Snead. I don't know that you can ever find an example where you've had three of the best to ever do it.
That's happening right now with NFL GMs and NFL agents where you can't just pigeonhole my player into a DE or OLB category.
There'll be no deal for Clowney by the deadline. And then the question becomes, when does he report to play this season?
This is a passing league. And if you got a guy that can go get the quarterback, he can wreak havoc and change the entire game, and he hasn't been able to do that.
Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald, DeMarcus Lawrence. I'm sure he's looking at those contracts and going, that's where I belong. Is he in that range? No.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
And you may not be able to pigeonhole NFL players into the length of their contract. You might just increasingly see running backs say in their third, perhaps their second year, I need some new money. How long, I've asked, until Saquon Barkley wants new money in New York? If you missed any of today's opening segment on how soon Saquon Barkley could hold out, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Venture Card. Earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day. What's in your wallet? The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can answer that question. Is that going to be the increasing trend in the NFL? Running backs holding out earlier into their career? And if that's the case, how long until Saquon Barkley needs a new contract in New York? Now, this idea that contracts don't hold you not only in terms of length of service, but to the location in which you play, the idea that contracts don't tell you anything about where players will be playing over the next several years. See Paul George and his exit 1 year into a 4-year contract with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Louis Riddick was on Get Up where he said NFL and NBA contracts are not the same.
I get it. In this day and age, especially with all these football players, watching basketball salaries just go through the roof, and it seems as though, hey, as long as you got one or two superstars in the NBA, you're good to go, and you could just fill it in with a bunch of guys off the street as far as the rest of the roster is concerned. Maybe that mentality is starting to creep into some NFL players' minds, but we all know it doesn't work that way in the NFL, and you're going to have an eye a little bit towards what the rest of the roster is going to look like if you wind up eating up too much of the salary cap pie. And hey, if it's still good for you and you don't mind losing football games because the rest of your roster is weak, then more power to you. But look, I get what he's saying, but it's not going to go down that way.
It may not be the power of NBA players, but it might be a market reality that running backs say, time for a new deal, right when they're playing their best, even if it's in the middle of their rookie contract. Stephen A. Smith Show, Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. Give me a call, 888-729-3776. Yesterday, when hanging out for Stephen A., we had a caller who, in the middle of a debate about whether or not the Dallas Cowboys should pay Dak Prescott, brought up a point that I found absolutely ridiculous. He offered up, as part of his argument, that Dak Prescott was performing in the weakest division in the NFL, the NFC East. And I find that absurd. Here's what that caller had to say.
I think that the Cowboys Dak $30 million a year because he averages 240 yards a game, and yes, he's won his division twice, but one year he didn't get close to winning it, and that was the year Zeke wasn't there. That's because Zeke and the defense carry the team, and it's in the weakest conference in the NFL, or one of the weakest conferences for sure, and that's inarguable.
NFC East as the weakest division in the NFL, and that's inarguable. Let me try to argue it. I believe that the NFC is not the weakest division in the NFL. In fact, I'm going to give you what I think are the strongest and weakest divisions across the league. The strongest division, in my estimation, is the NFC South. You can measure this by how many teams are real playoff contenders and then how many teams are real Super Bowl contenders in each division. I think the NFC South offers up 3 clear playoff caliber teams. The Atlanta Falcons, the New Orleans Saints, and the Carolina Panthers are all good enough to be competing in deep into the playoffs of the NFL season. I also believe that among those, 2 of those teams are real Super Bowl contenders. Obviously, the New Orleans Saints, having reached the NFC Championship game and one controversial non-call away from a Super Bowl appearance, are a Super Bowl contender. But I also believe that the Atlanta Falcons are a Super Bowl contender. We heard that a little bit earlier from ESPN NFL insider Field Yates. He agreed with me. While they have the Falcons ranked 15th over the next 3 years up on ESPN.com, I asked him for his surprise team, one we're not paying attention to. And he said the Falcons and the talent of that roster. I agree. The Falcons are a Super Bowl contender. And the NFC South is one of only 3 divisions that I think is home to at least 2 Super Bowl contenders. The other 2 divisions that have 2 Super Bowl contenders in their ranks are the AFC West with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Los Angeles Chargers, and the NFC East with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys. Those 2 divisions don't have much below those 2 teams. They're both top-heavy. 2 playoff contenders, 2 Super Bowl contenders. After the Cowboys and Eagles, there's not much in the NFC East. The Redskins and the Giants simply aren't where they need to be in their building process. And in the AFC West, the Raiders and the Broncos are contenders for neither. So while they're not the top in the NFL, that's the NFC South, they're nowhere near the bottom of the league. In my estimation, the worst division in the NFL is the AFC North. I see 2 real playoff teams and no real Super Bowl contenders. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns are playoff teams. I know very well that the Baltimore Ravens were in the playoffs a year ago. Forgive me, I do not believe that Lamar Jackson as the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens is going to keep them in contention with the rise of the Cleveland Browns. It's a rise that I am ready to tap the brakes on. I still believe the Steelers are the team to beat in that division. But I recognize that the Browns are coming. And I think they're going to blow right past the Ravens. But I don't think either of them are Super Bowl contenders. And I think that that's one of the few divisions, in fact, the only division across the league that doesn't house a Super Bowl contender. In every other division, you can find one team that I think is ready to compete for a Super Bowl. But the AFC North, in my estimation, right now, where we sit today, is the worst division in the NFL. The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Drivers who switch and save pay an average of $699 less per year. Let's hit up the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. First, let's go to Dan in Kansas City. What's up, Dan? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hi, Will. How you doing? I know you're a big Cowboys fan. I'm here a big Chiefs fan. I think the Chiefs are going to do it this year. Who knows? Maybe your Cowboys and my Chiefs will be in the Super Bowl. What do you think of Spagnuolo? Do you think he'll get that Chiefs defense turned around?
Well, Dan, I would say this, man. I think you got some defensive problems. And one of the things that we've learned about the NFL is when you have such an explosive offense, such an off-the-charts season that the Kansas City Chiefs just had offensively, there is some regression. The next year, there's not quite the explosion. There's not quite the amazing point totals put up in that 1 year. That's the way it works across the board. I still think you have an amazing quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. But if that's true, if your offense rescinds or recedes just a little bit and your defense doesn't pick up the slack, Chiefs may not be everything we think they're. Look, I still think they're high. Over the next 3-year ratings, I still think they're high. But I'm not sure I'm ready to say the Chiefs are the best in the AFC. That still belongs to the New England Patriots, Dan.
Okay. Thank you anyway. Take care of yourself, Will.
All right. Love you, Dan. All right. Let's go to Brock in Baton Rouge. What's up, Brock? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, Will. How you doing today?
I'm good, man.
Good. Look, I just wanted to talk a little bit about these contract situations. You know, you were talking earlier about the difference, how the NBA and NFL are obviously different. And in the NBA, I definitely think these guys kind of have seen for years how GMs treat the situation almost like a fantasy league. Like if they want to get rid of guys and bring in a whole new roster, they have the power to do that. And I think the players now are figuring out, like, hey, we can do that too. And, you know, and if that translates over to the NFL, where, again, the GMs have shown that if they want to get rid of a guy, he's gone. If they want to, you know, try to bring in somebody else on a big trade, you know, they'll surrender a lot of pieces to do that. And if the players ever get to that point where they can start getting on these 1-year and 2-year contracts and have a little bit more guaranteed on the back end, I think that's something that fans might like to even see, where now instead of real fantasy, you have real fantasy rosters changing year to year.
Brock, I hope we don't see that. That would just kill. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the difference between the NBA and the NFL when it comes to these contracts and why I believe the running back position could soon get to what I'm talking about, with running backs holding out 1-2 years into their rookie contracts. I think it's because they're forced to, but that doesn't mean they're going to go down the path of the NBA. I'll tell you exactly what I mean by that. Plus, if you disagree with my NFL division rankings, hit me up. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Your radio, your computer, your phone. Or just tell your smart speaker to play ESPN Radio.
Now playing ESPN Radio.
Take ESPN everywhere.
Dak Prescott has not yet reached a contract extension with the Dallas Cowboys. And there's an anticipation that he's not going to give the Dallas Cowboys a hometown discount, a Tom Brady discount to build around him. That more and more analysts are suggesting don't put Dak Prescott in the $30 million a year club. Right now you got 4 quarterbacks on an annualized basis who make $30 million a year. Those quarterbacks are Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, and Carson Wentz. And there is a sense that if the Cowboys do this, they will compromise the rest of their roster and ask the quarterback to carry the team in a way Dak Prescott has not proven capable of doing. Here's what Max Kellerman had to say on First Take.
Eventually, he may be a truly great quarterback, but that time is not yet. And if you're going to tell me I got to pay him $36 million a year, I ain't doing it. I like him better than Goff. Goff has more talent, but I'd rather have Dak as my quarterback. He has more stuff. Carson Wentz is another story. I'm going to put Carson Wentz aside. I think he's better than both those guys. But, injuries notwithstanding. But Dak I like a lot. I think eventually he'll be elite. But if you overpay him now, Key, you won't put a good enough team around him to win.
That was Max Kellerman earlier today on First Take, and earlier today on the Stephen A. Smith Show here with Will Cain. NFL front office insider Louis Riddick essentially agreed with that analysis from Max Kellerman. I disagree. I think Dak will be elite. Watch Zeke Elliott. He may not show up. Watch Zeke Elliott. He may want to get paid now. Now, Melvin Gordon is entering the 5th-year option of his contract, while Zeke still has 2 years left on his contract. As far as Zeke is concerned individually, it makes smart business sense. But this puts the Cowboys into a predicament because they have Dak, they have Amari Cooper, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they just paid DeMarcus Lawrence, they have Byron Jones, they have a ton of players that need to get paid. But I'm here to tell you, when they start that list, when they start passing out money, the first guy they need to pay is Dak Prescott.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Is the NFL turning into the NBA? Will players soon have short-term contracts or contracts that don't dictate how much they make or where they'll be playing? Instead, it moves in the direction of fantasy. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern. I don't think so. As Mark Cuban recently said, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, the NBA is a talent-driven league. The talent has the power. With fewer players on the floor at any given time and fewer players among them that can truly dictate the outcome of a season, the NBA is beholden to the desires of its top talent. The NFL is not that way, even at the highest levels, even among quarterbacks, the most precious position in the NFL. The biggest stars, the biggest names, and the biggest personalities of the league, you don't see this kind of power wielded. You don't see quarterbacks moving around on short-term deals. In fact, in recent memory, how many quarterbacks can you even talk about of consequence going from one team to another? One. Kirk Cousins. And we all lost our minds when Kirk Cousins goes from the Washington Redskins to the Minnesota Vikings. Other than that level of talent doesn't carry along with it the kind of power to dictate not just where you play, but what you make. There's one position that I'm intrigued by, and it is the position of running back, because it has so little power. At some point, you're backed into a corner. At some point, you have no other course of action. At some point, if the league is telling you that you're not that valuable, you're not going to get your second contract, then when you are running for 1,400 yards a year, when you are 2 or 3 years into your contract, when you do have no other choice, you'll try to wield the little power that you have. At some point, as is rumored, Ezekiel Elliott may just hold out because now's the time that he could get paid. And at some point, we're going to see that window bumped up for running backs into their point of highest leverage, into their point of highest power. At some point, we are going to see a running back like Saquon Barkley, if not Saquon Barkley, say, $8 million isn't what I'm worth. And I don't care if it's the second year of my NFL career. That's going to happen because it has to. I've asked what's the weakest and strongest divisions in the NFL. It's Will Cain in for Stephen A. Let me go to Eddie in LA. What's up, Eddie? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, Will.
Hey, man.
How you doing, Will?
I'm all right.
Always a pleasure listening to you.
Thanks. Get to it, bud. What do you got?
You there?
Yep. Give it to me.
No, what? Yeah, I have to disagree. I was thinking you were going to say the AFC South was going to be the weakest.
I said the AFC South is the strongest, man.
You think the strongest?
Yes.
Okay.
Three playoff teams.
Then the Texans. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just saying, other than the Texans, the Tennessee Titans are going to have their quarterback issues.
You got AFC South as the weakest. I said NFC South was the strongest. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Texans, Titans. You think this is the weakest? I'll tell you what, Eddie. I had them as in the bottom third. I had them sixth weakest. I agree with you. Only 2 teams that are playoff teams, but one of them's a playoff Super Bowl contender. I think the Colts are playoff Super Bowl contenders, Eddie.
Really? Okay, yeah, because I don't think they have a Super Bowl contender. That's why I was going to say that they're the weakest.
No. I watched the Colts, man. They're a Super Bowl contender. And that's what I did. Thanks for the call, Eddie. I said, how many playoff teams do you have? And among them, are there any real Super Bowl contenders? You're right. Not many in the AFC South, but the Colts are a contender. If you could have any coach in the NFL not named Bill Belichick, who would you pick? It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can answer that question. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Hey, you need seats to a game? Download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat. Get a Vivid seat. I'll tell you who I think should be your top coach in the NFL after Bill Belichick in just a moment here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. But I've asked, what's the worst division in the NFL? I told you. It is the AFC North. I don't see any real Super Bowl contenders and only 2 playoff teams in the AFC North. That would be the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns. But there's some that disagree with me, like Brian in North Carolina. What's up, Brian? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
How's it going, Will? How you doing today, bud?
Good.
How do you not see my Steelers as a Super Bowl contender?
Well,
we're replacing Antonio with Juju. We moved up in the draft 10th to take Devin Bush. Granted, our defense hasn't been the same since Shazier got hurt, but our defense is coming back. James Conner looked nice last year. He's going to improve this year. Big Ben's going to be Big Ben. You know that. So how can you say that you don't see the Steelers as a Super Bowl contender?
Okay. Well, before you take this as an insult, all right, did the Steelers make the playoffs last year?
No, sir, we didn't.
Okay. So here's what I think the Steelers are. I think they win the division. I think they make it to the second round of the playoffs. And that's what I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are this coming season. So before we take this as an insult, realize I think they're going to be better than they were a year ago. But you have to understand something. That's me believing in the Steelers, Brian, okay? Because your argument amounted to 2 things. Devin Bush, and everybody had a pick in the first round of the NFL draft, and Juju Smith-Schuster, which last year you had Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. So why would the receiving corps be better just by taking away Antonio Brown? I don't see a compelling reason to make them a Super Bowl contender. And the biggest reason to doubt that is I don't think Mike Tomlin's been able to bring this roster together over the last several years to reach its full potential. I think this is a team, Brian, that has underachieved and underachieved significantly.
I agree. I totally agree. But last year we had too much turmoil. This year we're not going to have all the locker room issues. I think Tomlin is going to have these guys together more than they have been the last couple of years. And I honestly think that we may make a strong Super Bowl run.
All right, I appreciate the call, Brian. What I'm telling you about the Steelers, and then as an extension, what I'm telling you about the AFC North is I think people have discounted the Steelers too soon. I think they've anointed the Browns too soon. But while I think both of those teams are playoff teams, I don't think either are Super Bowl contenders. I think the Steelers are a second-round exit in the playoffs. And because those are the only 2 teams that I think are real playoff contenders, I think it's the worst division in the NFL. Charles in North Carolina. What's up, Charles? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Well, can I tell you something? You forgot about
Charles, what happened?
Ron Rivera.
Charles.
Yes.
Who you talking to?
Huh?
Who you talking to?
Steve Smith.
No. Two wrong in 2 ways. When I picked up the phone, you were telling somebody, let me tell you what I'm talking about. Who are you talking to?
Charles Statham.
Okay. And you're talking to Will Cain, not Stephen A. Smith. What's up, Charles? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Will Cain?
Yes, sir.
You forgot about one coach in a great franchise.
Oh?
It's Panthers. We got to recruit. Christian Pat, one of the best running backs in the NFL. I'm a PSF for 20 years. And we beat your Cowboys about a couple years on Thanksgiving Day. You don't remember that day. We spanked you that day. We spanked you.
You didn't beat us on Thanksgiving Day, but you beat us.
Yes, we did. It was a couple years ago.
Well, you beat us the second game. You beat us the second game of the season last year.
Couple years ago. But you don't give them that. You don't give Chris McCaffrey no credit. You don't give Ron Rivera no care. We've been to 2 Super Bowls. Your Cowboys haven't been there since 1995 when you're.
Hey, Charles, what is this? What is this second place trophies you're bragging about? You're bragging about getting to Super Bowls? Cowboys won 5 Super Bowls. Won them.
What? You haven't won in 23 years, my friend.
Well, my friend, let me tell you something. I ranked Christian McCaffrey as, I believe, the 4th best running back in the league the other day. So don't you tell me I'm being mean to you or the Panthers.
Well, will you mind telling David Carr something for me? We're not the 16th best. We got rabid fans in Carolina. We got a rain, sleet, or snow most of it. We got a pretty good fan base. I know we got a tough division with the Saints and the Falcons and the Bucks, but like I said, you said Dak needs to get big. Do me one favor. Tell Dak win the NFC Championship game and win a Super Bowl at Troy, and then I will give you the credit. He'll give us big money, okay?
Okay, I got you, Charles. I'll do that. Can somebody give me Dak's phone number? Charles wants me to call Dak and tell him to win an NFC Championship game, and then Charles will give him the credit that he gives Troy. I need to do this right now. I need to call Dak and pass on Charles' message. Because if Dak doesn't know what it's going to take to get Charles' respect, I'm afraid Dak won't do it. I can't call Tad Prescott, who's a devoted listener to the Will Cain Show, and I assume when Will Cain is filling in for Stephen A. Smith. If you could have any coach in the NFL not named Bill Belichick, so essentially you have the second round draft pick on drafting coaches in the NFL, who do you take? I think the best way to answer that question is ask yourself, what does Bill Belichick give you? What is unique? And there are several boxes that I need checked when it comes to an NFL coach. I ask myself these things. Number one, can he win in multiple ways? Can he morph? Can it be a passing offense one year, be a running-based offense in the next? That's what we see with Bill Belichick, constant ability to change who you are. In the early days of the Patriots dynasty, it was Tom Brady as a game manager. Tom Brady as a caretaker. It evolved into the late 2000s as Tom Brady as an absolute Peyton Manning-esque, lighted-up quarterback. It moves from a Randy Moss wide receiver-based offense to a Rob Gronkowski slot receiver-based offense. And then ultimately, it moves back to the short passing game in place of the running game. Defense's role in this comes in and out throughout time. It has morphed in multiple ways as Bill Belichick found ways to win. He adjusts to his talent. Number two, at any given time, he looks at the personnel he has and makes sure he puts that talent in the best position to succeed. Number three, he manages that talent, both from a salary cap perspective and a locker room perspective. He doesn't overpay. He says goodbye to some very big names. And you never hear about discord inside that New England Patriots locker room. He develops talent. Number four, finding players outside of the top 10 in the draft, always drafting near the bottom of the first round and developing that talent to continue to replace the holes, continue to replace the guys that you have to say goodbye to. And number five, he adjusts to the other team, not just his personnel, but to the other team's weaknesses. We've had Teddy Bruschi and several former Patriots come onto the Will Cain Show and talk about the fact that he will take from you exactly what it is you're willing to give. He'll exploit your weaknesses the minute he finds them out. I want a coach that comes as close to checking as many of those boxes as I can find. Pete Carroll has done a great job of developing talent and won in multiple ways, from defense and a running game to now Russell Wilson throwing it all over the place. But he hasn't managed that locker room. You've continually heard of problems in Seattle's locker room. Andy Reid's developed and he's schemed in ways to put that team in a position to win. But also, has he managed that locker room? Has he adjusted? Has Andy Reid adjusted in the way that Bill Belichick continues to adjust? And Sean McVay, he's developed, he's had a scheme, he's adapted to what the other team has, he's taken from the other team what they're willing to give. We haven't yet seen, can Sean McVay manage a locker room and talent and a salary cap over the long haul? I'm not saying he can't, we just haven't seen him do it yet. Now, the coach that I would pick right after Bill Belichick, with my second pick of drafting coaches across the NFL that checks as many of these boxes as I can get, is the New Orleans Saints head coach, Sean Payton. He's been a high-flying offense that throws the ball over the place. He's had a two-headed running attack that now shoulders the load. He adjusts to his personnel and your weaknesses. He's developed talent and managed that locker room through time. Sean Payton is the second best coach in the NFL. Let me put that to somebody who would know. That's former NFL offensive lineman and ESPN radio host Jeff Schwartz, who joins me now on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. What's up, Jeff?
How you doing, buddy?
Good.
Football starts tomorrow, the first team in camp. Can you believe that?
Starts today here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. What do you think, man? I just laid out that I think that the second best coach in the NFL, the best coach not named Bill Belichick, is Sean Payton. What do you think?
Yeah, I heard the tail end of that segment. Look, I'm partial to Andy Reid. I played for him. My brother plays for him, so I know Andy very well. And I think he's just done more with less over his time than Sean Payton has. We can argue whether or not Donovan Mabb is a Hall of Famer or not. Alex Smith is a great pro, in my opinion. He's not a Hall of Famer. He came to Kansas City when they were 2-14 the year before. We went to the playoffs the very following year. I do agree with you, though, that at times there are some issues within his team, but he's able to kind of coach around those at times. And he has had some failures in big moments, but he's now made 6 championship games, 1 Super Bowl. Sean Payton is 1-0 in Super Bowls, I believe. So, and I think he's been one other championship game. I don't know. I just think Andy Reid is such a fabulous coach. And you mentioned adjusting, man. The first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, maybe even the first 6 weeks, Andy Reid comes out with almost like a brand new offense. I mean, he might be the best in the NFL at doing that. I agree that Belichick, though, is clearly the best coach in the NFL.
Talking to Jeff Schwartz here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. All right, let's stay on Andy Reid for just a moment. Outside of obviously the scoreboard and winning it all, what do you think is Andy Reid's biggest weakness?
I think that coaches, offensive coaches, and this is Andy and also I believe in other offensive-minded coaches, they love to pass the ball. They often get paralyzed at times when kind of like a more calm offense is required, like a more running attack is required. I've been in one of those games where we were up 38-10 in the third quarter. We started having injuries. It would have been best just to run the ball and punt almost, but instead we tried to pass the ball a little bit too much. We had a turnover, a strip sack, and then just kind of it started down the stretch of the Colts coming back. And not just Andy, but other coaches do this as well, where they lean on the pass because it's what they know. They're offensive coaches, offensive head coaches, OCs. They're in charge of the pass game. The offensive line coach is in charge of the run game. The OCs, the head coach, they don't have anything to really do with the run game. They fall back on the pass game. I think that's been his weakness. Is at times when games get tight and maybe you need to run the football and whatnot, he passes a little bit too much and it does hurt him. But, it's been a problem at times at the end of seasons and in playoff games.
Talking to Jeff Schwartz here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. So, Jeff, I laid out all those things that I want to see from a head coach. Can you win in multiple ways? Can you adjust to your opponent? Can you adjust to your own personnel? Can you develop? Can you manage that locker room and the salary cap and make tough choices on who to keep? I don't think anybody, and I think you agree with me on this, rivals Bill Belichick on that. But the reason I pick Sean Payton is, to me, he checks most of those boxes. He checks more of those boxes than anybody else. But there are many out there, I know this, who believe that Sean Payton's actually underachieved with what he's had in New Orleans. Are you in that camp, Jeff? Do you think he should have done more over the last several years? You said 1-0 in Super Bowls, and I almost feel like that's what I heard underneath that.
No, he did do that, which obviously is very important to win the Super Bowl, and Andy Reid has not done that.
No, but you said 1-0, and I heard in there almost like that one appearance isn't enough for where he's been all these years.
Well, I mean, I just think if you look at Andy Reid and him making NFC NFC 5 times, the AFC now once. I mean, that's a cumulative career so far. And Sean Payton hasn't had as many opportunities at the dance, but he's won that opportunity, which is to Andy Reid's kind of fault. I don't know if it's actually his fault, but he needs that Super Bowl win, I think, to bump him above people like yourself who have him behind Sean. I don't think Sean Payton's a bad choice to be ahead of Andy Reid, but the question is, 3 straight 7 to 9 years? You don't really see any of those out of Andy Reid. You can blame the defense possibly in New Orleans, and how much of that goes on Sean Payton as an offensive coach, and he's not the general manager, even though he probably has a lot of say in what happens with personnel. So I think they're very evenly matched. Again, I know Andy Reid well. I played for him, so I have a lot of respect for him. But the guys I know that played with Sean Payton love him as well. So I think they're very close. I would just go with Andy Reid.
You're right, though. If you're making a list of coaches who a Super Bowl victory would do the most to improve their reputation, their resume, Andy Reid's got to be near the top of that list. I think another one, by the way, is a coach that I don't have a ton of love or respect for, and that's Jason Garrett. But if he did happen to win a Super Bowl after 9 years of his process, it would take all that heat off of him. Talking to former NFL offensive lineman Jeff Schwartz here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. So, Jeff, you have a new column up. It's at SB Nation, right now?
Yes.
And in that column, which I was reading this morning, you were talking about the running back market. Now, I've spent some time today here on the Stephen A. Smith Show laying out that I believe the running back market is under such a transformation that teams are going to be soon making bold moves away from talented running backs, like the Pittsburgh Steelers did with Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
But I think, Jeff, in response to that, running backs are going to be pushing up into their careers, the timeline on which they ask for new money, like Ezekiel Elliott is doing right now, just 3 years into his career. And I've even said I wouldn't be surprised for guys like Saquon Barkley to push it up even sooner, because it's a natural reaction to not getting your second contract. If you're not going to pay me then, pay me now when I'm clearly worth something to you. You wrote today there's only one running back in the league that you feel like makes a difference between winning and losing. Who's that?
Zeke Elliott. And I know that you love to hear that as a Cowboys fan. I'm actually very high on the Cowboys this year. I hope offensively Kellen Moore, Jason Garrett are more aggressive with Dak. If that happens with Travis Frederick back and everyone healthy, obviously assuming that's going to be the case, they're going to be really good this year because we know they're going to be good on defense. But back to Zeke Elliott, I think what he does in the run game with the style of run game they have, it's not a lot of run plays, but they're very efficient run plays, and Zeke is very good at that. But more than that, he's outstanding in the pass game. I mean, he goes for a long screen almost every single game. Maybe every other game he hits a 60-yard screen pass. He's good for Dak as kind of an outlet in the pass game. I think if you remove him from that offense, we've seen when he was suspended, and Tyron Smith was out as well, which hurt the offense. They're just a different offense. And we saw with C.J. Anderson coming up for Todd Gurley, that offense, they ran different run plays, but the production was still there. And the Cowboys are already good. So if you remove him from that situation, I don't think they're going to be as good. People argue, well, Saquon Barkley, the Giants aren't even good. So if you remove him, they're still not going to be very good. So let me see more from Saquon Barkley before I get there. I just think Zeke is so talented in what the Cowboys asked him to do that if they were to remove him, they'd have a problem. That being said, you have to pay Dak instead of him. I mean, if it comes down to who you're going to pay, do you pay Dak instead of Zeke? 100% of the time, you always do that. But I think Zeke is so valuable. So it's weird for me because I'm with you. I wouldn't really pay running backs. But if you want to keep the band together and the offense together, then you kind of have to find a way to pay both.
So you wouldn't pay Melvin Gordon then? You wouldn't break the bank for Melvin Gordon?
No. Austin Eckler had a great year last year, averaged over 5 yards a carry. Melvin Gordon does fall into kind of the criteria I laid out for why or how you can pay a quarterback on your team, which is you have to have your franchise quarterback already in place and paid up. And that's part of the problem with the Cowboys. They have to pay Dak. The Chargers have a left tackle. They have 2 pass rushers, and they have a secondary. They have franchise pieces in place. So if you want to pay a Melvin Gordon to stay on your roster as another weapon, I'm actually fine with that. But you can't just give in. He hasn't played, I don't think, a full 16 games in a while. Austin Eckler is doing just as good of a job. The stats show that when Keenan Allen is out, their wide receiver, they're a much worse offense than when Melvin Gordon is out, which is obvious, I think, because Phil Rivers throws the ball so much and Keenan Allen is so dynamic to help Phil Rivers. It just shows you, same with Pittsburgh, you can get the same production out of James Conner that you got from Le'Veon Bell in the run game, not quite in the pass game. So I wouldn't do it if I was the Chargers. He's under contract still.
It's former NFL offensive lineman Jeff Schwartz here on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain. So let me push back on as you assumed, I would like your Ezekiel Elliott analysis, and I do as a Cowboy fan, but your estimation that he's the one running back that you would pay in the NFL because it makes a difference between winning and losing, and he does so much. And I think you're right on all of those things. My only rebuttal to that would be we would have said the same things about Todd Gurley a year ago. And I mean, your analysis would have been exactly the same. And I'm not sure if you gave the Los Angeles Rams a do-over that they'd be offering Todd Gurley that same contract a year later.
It's funny. My brother texted me the exact same thing today. He said, we would have said the same thing about Gurley last year, and look what happened. I told my brother, I said, if Zeke's hurt this year and someone comes in and puts up the same production, I'll take my opinion back. Zeke does not have the injury concerns that Gurley had. Remember, Gurley's knee was a little bit beat up from college already, and yeah, I mean that's very bad. That's why I don't think as much as I praise Zeke Elliott for how good he is in his offense, I'm not sure I'd pay him. I think I would pay a bunch of other people on that team before I pay the running back. I just don't see, to your point, the value in paying a guy that much money at that position.
So Jeff, don't you think a natural reaction is where I started this show today? Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. I started this out with, look, man, this is going to happen. Like if the league keeps sending a message to running backs that you're not going to see your second contract, you're not going to get your payday. You'll see a second contract, but it won't be the money that you want or you expect. And teams won't be wrong, right? Because we've seen, everybody follows their own incentive. They've seen that running backs tail off right about the time their second contract comes in. Well, in response to that, what we're going to see is running backs attempting to renegotiate their deal midway into their rookie deal, like Zeke's doing right now. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Saquon Barkley's 1 year into his rookie deal, and he's never had, your point is well taken that the Giants aren't any good, but his power and leverage and importance has never been higher. Saquon Barkley's worth more than $8 million a year right now, and he has to try to cash in when that's the equation. when he's worth his most. I'm just thinking sooner or later, apparently sooner rather than later, we're going to see running backs push up their holdouts in attempts at contract renegotiation.
Yeah, if you're a first-round draft pick, I believe in the current CBA, you're not allowed to renegotiate till after 3 years. So that actually hurts some of these running backs. And I wonder with the new CBA how contract structures will change. But yeah, Zeke Elliott's doing it right now. This is the time to do it. Before I think Melvin Gordon should have done this holdout before OTA started, when teams kind of still needed a running back. Zeke kind of is at the perfect time for him because he's so valuable. Hey guys, I'm not going to show up to camp. Good luck without me. This is the leverage he's using now. I'm with you. I think that he sees it, the writing on the wall, that the Cowboys probably don't want to pay him. Not many people are going to pay him, most likely. And the wear and tear in his body. He's getting a lot of carries, a lot of catches. And good for him. I'm all for players trying to get their money when they can. And I think you're right. You're going to see more running backs try to get money after the third year. And then, of course, if the CBA changes where guys can negotiate much earlier in their contracts, you'll see them do that then.
All right. Former NFL offensive lineman and ESPN radio host Jeff Schwartz here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
All right. Take care, bud.
The satisfying crunch of Nature Valley Crunchy Bars can keep your family going, which means more outside fun for you. And with whole grain oats and real delicious honey, it's really tasty too. Nature Valley Oats and Honey Crunch Bars. So with all these conversations we're having about player movement and contracts being broken, there's one guy out there who says he wants to commit to one market and one franchise for the long haul. There's one guy out there that says he wants to be like Steph Curry. He wants to be like Kobe Bryant. He wants to be like Dirk Nowitzki. He wants to be in the same place for 20 years. Who is that? It's coming up on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Will Cain filling in.
This show and all of ESPN is streaming live on the ESPN app. Now with ESPN Plus, where you get more ESPN. Download the ESPN.
We might be watching something that we can say has never happened, which is not just the best and not just the second best, but the three best to ever do it go head to head. Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic squared off in the finals of Wimbledon yesterday in an over 6-hour match, the first in history to go to a tiebreaker at 12 games apiece. And Novak Djokovic beat Roger Federer in that Wimbledon final, taking his Grand Slam total up to 16. He trails Rafael Nadal, who has 18, who trails Roger Federer, who has 20. It's the three highest totals, 20, 18, and 16, of any player to ever play the game. These three are the three best to ever do it. Whoever else you want to put into the conversation comes in a distant fourth. Pete Sampras with 14 Grand Slams. What I'm telling you is we're watching something unprecedented. Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. But now you can't have that discussion because it's clear that Tiger Woods is one of the greatest golfers, if not the greatest golfer of all time. Messi and Ronaldo are the two greatest soccer players of all time, but you have to stop at a duo. You can't find a third member who is trading punches here, haymakers, back and forth like Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. You can't find it. Best I can look, in the 1980s, you had Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Thomas the Hitman Hearns, and Marvin Hagler. There was four. And in their weight class, they're certainly all four in the top 50 greatest boxers of all time. And that's according to ESPN's ranking. But the greatest of all time, you got to talk about Ali. And in the 70s, you did have Ali, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman. That was one hell of a battle between those three, but are we talking about the three greatest of all time? Ali won that. Ali is clearly the greatest of all time. Again, you go back in golf history, you can start finding times when you had two guys trading it back and forth, like Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen, Ben Hogan and Sam Snead. I don't know that you can ever find an example where you've had three of the best to ever do it. There's a growing drumbeat within media circles. The Dallas Cowboys should not pay Dak Prescott.
If you overpay him now, you won't put a good enough team around him to win.
They have to manage their roster.
They don't have the ability to just simply give Zeke Elliott exactly what he wants right now because it's going to cost them elsewhere.
If you're going to tell me I got to pay him $36 million a year, I ain't doing it.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
While NBA stars continue to gang up, join forces, and break contracts, one of the league's biggest rising stars says, that's not for me. He wants to be like Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan. He wants to be like Dirk Nowitzki. One of the league's youngest and brightest stars wants to stick with one market for 20 years. That's very good news for one fan base. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and on ESPN News. I'll tell you about the star that just stays old school here in a minute, just on the Stephen A. Smith Show. But let me hit up the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, where I was talking about the power rankings of the NFL over the next 3 years. Who is the best position to compete for a Super Bowl over the next 3 years? And Cole in Georgia doesn't like where the Falcons came in at 15th. What's up, Cole?
Hey, Will, how you doing?
Good.
Good. I have to say, to show that I don't have my homework glasses on, I disagree with Bill Gates about putting them in the top 10.
Okay. So you called in to say that ESPN.com has it right?
I called in to say I think they should be in the top 5.
Oh, okay, Cole. Top 5 over the next 3 years. So you're hold on, Cole. Now, so who are we displacing here? Because in the top 5, you have the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Colts. You have, hold on, just got to refresh here. Patriots, Eagles, and Seahawks. You're putting the Falcons ahead of them. Well, I think somebody should be ahead of the Seahawks. I agree with you on that. I'm just not sure it's the Falcons.
I think they're set on offense and the young talent on defense. I mean, they stirred up their offensive line. So I think they're in a really good position to win a lot of games.
All right. Well, Cole, here's where I'll agree with you. Thanks for the call, man. I think the Falcons are better than they're being ranked right now. I think the Falcons are a Super Bowl contender. I think they're one of the 2 in the NFC South that are real Super Bowl contenders, along with the New Orleans Saints. I think the Seahawks over the next 3 years are being overrated. I just don't know that I would pull the Falcons all the way up from 15th to 5th. But I will agree with you that they are being underrated. Robert in Virginia. What's up, Robert? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Hey, Will. Thanks for taking my call about it.
Yeah, man.
I had a couple things I want to point out. I want to start off by saying I wanted to correct you when you took the call from the guy in Carolina. That was actually week 1 game that we lost to Carolina because I was there. It wasn't the second week.
I said second week. You know what the deal is, Robert? I'm so used to playing the Giants at home every year in week 1 that I think that just happens every year. Week 1, Giants at home. Isn't that happening again this year? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Cowboys, Giants.
I'm a big Cowboy fan. But anyway, second, I would have to pick the worst division in the NFL. Would have to be, as long as Tom Brady and Bill Belichick is in that division, it has to be the AFC East, excuse me.
Yeah,
as long
but
as they're always going to win.
Yeah. But, I mean, you do have to also factor in that the Patriots are there. I get you. Like, it's the shallowest division. One team. But that one team happens to go to the Super Bowl almost every year. So it's hard to say that division is weak when the Patriots are in it.
My strongest division, I would have to say, would have to be the NFC North. I mean, you look at it, three playoff contending teams. You can't count Aaron Rodgers out from the Super Bowl. Chicago's really looked good last year. And the last thing I wanted to point out is, if I had to bring another coach back, I know he's a former coach. Bring me Bill Cowher to the Dallas Cowboys. You bring me Bill Cowher, we'll win the Super Bowl along with a decent, good cornerback.
Yeah, I don't want.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah,
Will.
man. Thank you. I don't want. Honestly, I don't want somebody who's been retired. How long has Bill Cowher been retired now? You know, there is such thing as the power of habit. I mean, you get out of that purposeful workflow every day, that's a hard thing to jump back into. You start getting into that TV once a week life, and it's hard to go back to that NFL grind day in and day out. I'm telling you something, man. He's been retired since 2006. You're telling me Bill Cowher, after 13 years of living the good life, is ready to start worrying about Jerry Jones? Man, get out of here. I don't think you jump in after that much time off. I believe that the NFC North is a good division. I think there are 3 legit playoff teams, as you said, the Vikings, the Bears, and the Packers. But I'm not sure how many of them are real Super Bowl contenders. In fact, I need to see more from Mitch Trubisky before I can put the Bears in that class. The one team in that division that I put in the Super Bowl contender category is the Minnesota Vikings. I think they were close a year ago, took a step back last year, but I believe that team has a good defense, is well-rounded. I still believe in Dalvin Cook, one of the best wide receiving cores in the NFL, and Kirk Cousins has the ability to show that he can be better than Case Keenum was. The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance, protecting commercial vehicles and offering specialized coverage designed to protect small business. More at progressivecommercial.com. So Paul George breaks a 4-year contract 1 year into his deal and demands a trade from the Oklahoma City Thunder to the Los Angeles Clippers. And we've seen this go on and on across the NBA. From Anthony Davis to others, where you're breaking contracts 2 years with 2 years or more left on your deal. But there is one star who says he wants to do it differently. He wants to stick. Giannis Antetokounmpo wants to stay in Milwaukee for the long haul. And he believes that next year they're ready to win it all.
Win the champion is a realistic goal. Not every team in the NBA has that realistic goal to win the championship. It's probably like 4 or 5 teams that can say that, and we're one of them. So that's all you can ask for.
That's Giannis saying that the Bucks are one of 4 to 5 teams that can win it all the next year. I think there are actually 6, 7, 8 teams that have a real shot to win it all next year, but the Bucks are certainly part of it. And here's what else Giannis had to say. I quote now, "I want to be part of a winning team. As long as we have the same mindset and same approach to the game, there's no reason for me to move and not be like Steph Curry, not be like Dirk Nowitzki or Kobe Bryant or Tim Duncan." Giannis Antetokounmpo says he wants to be one of those players that sticks with a team for 2 decades if they keep their mindset on winning. Giannis is a rare breed. Doesn't want to hang out with other stars in the offseason, doesn't want to train with them, doesn't want them to see his secrets and what he's working on, doesn't want them to see his weaknesses in pickup games in the offseason. Giannis is about being the best player in the league, and according to this, he's also about staying in Milwaukee and winning it all for the Bucks. Now, there are a lot of teams that are lined up already looking to 2021, the year of Giannis's free agency. And I would say to those teams, do not hold your breath. I know the Dallas Mavericks have their eye on Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know the New York Knicks, having been spurned in free agency, already are looking ahead to 2021 when Giannis is on the market. And for any team planning all of their future building around a free agency period still 2 years away, and the idea that Giannis Antetokounmpo will be your Anthony Davis, he'll be your big fish that you can attract from some other organization, either in a forced trade or in a free agent acquisition, you might want to look elsewhere. This dude isn't built that way. This dude's built the old school way. Giannis Antetokounmpo is there to stick in Milwaukee. Congratulations, Bucks fans. Meanwhile, Ben Simmons of the Philadelphia 76ers signs a max deal. And Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman were on First Take, where they were debating a few days ago Ben Simmons and whether or not he's worth it.
I understand that Ben Simmons cannot shoot. I am telling you that is the only thing that he can't do. So when I look at that, I look at his size, his athleticism, what he is in the open court, his ability to finish at the basket. Shoots 56% from the field now.
No, he doesn't.
When you look, I'm just saying.
He 56% shoots? No, he dunks 50%. What does he shoot?
Listen, I can say the same thing about the Greek Freak to a lesser degree. Mm-hmm. He finishes in the basket, he dunks on you. I'm just saying. The point is, 56% of his shots, in the interior, he finishes. All I'm saying is when you take that into account, his skill set, his upside, and at 6'10" for crying out loud, and he's turning 23 this month, please, I'm locking that brother in.
I, clear my throat, swallow hard, agree with Stephen A. Smith. You lock in Ben Simmons. I don't know if that jump shot's ever going to come, but I do know I like Ben Simmons and Giannis Antetokounmpo in the same conversation. I do know that the Philadelphia 76ers did the right thing in locking up Ben Simmons. This is a foundational piece. This is a building block. This is a player who can be one of the two best players on a championship team. The 76ers did the right thing here in locking up Ben Simmons. But remember now, it's the NBA. That doesn't mean he's around for the long haul. That means he's around for the foreseeable future. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. We're going to close out with your calls here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.
The Stephen A. Smith Show is being brought to you by Barbasol. Hey, sports fans.
Dak Prescott has not yet reached a contract extension with the Dallas Cowboys. And there's an anticipation that he's not going to give the Dallas Cowboys a hometown discount, a Tom Brady discount to build around him. That more and more analysts are suggesting don't put Dak Prescott in the $30 million a year club. Right now, you got 4 quarterbacks on an annualized basis who make $30 million a year. Those quarterbacks are Russell Wilson, Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, and Carson Wentz. And there is a sense that if the Cowboys do this, they will compromise the rest of their roster and ask the quarterback to carry the team in a way Dak Prescott has not proven capable of doing. Here's what Max Kellerman had to say on First Take.
Eventually, he may be a truly great quarterback, but that time is not yet. And if you're going to tell me I got to pay him $36 million a year, I ain't doing it. I like him better than Goff. Goff has more talent, but I'd rather have Dak as my quarterback. He has more stuff. Carson Wentz is another story. I'm going to put Carson Wentz aside. I think he's better than both those guys. But, injuries notwithstanding. But Dak I like a lot. I think eventually he'll be elite. But if you overpay him now, Key, you won't put a good enough team around him to win.
That was Max Kellerman earlier today on First Take and earlier today on the Stephen A. Smith Show here with Will Cain. NFL front office insider Louis Riddick essentially agreed with that analysis from Max Kellerman. I disagree. I think Dak will be elite. Watch Zeke Elliott. He may not show up. Watch Zeke Elliott. He may want to get paid now. Now, Melvin Gordon is entering the 5th-year option of his contract, while Zeke still has 2 years left on his contract. As far as Zeke is concerned individually, it makes smart business sense. But this puts the Cowboys into a predicament because they have Dak, they have Amari Cooper, they have Ezekiel Elliott, they just paid DeMarcus Lawrence, they have Byron Jones, they have a ton of players that need to get paid. But I'm here to tell you, when they start that list, when they start passing out money, the first guy they need to pay is Dak Prescott.
The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Stephen A. Smith Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line.
Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio. Will Cain filling in for Stephen A. You can normally catch me 3 to 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. You know, the hallways of ESPN, hanging out around here in between commercial breaks, I got to be honest with you, it's not that different than some of the stuff you hear on radio. You guys know how it works. Your boy Nuno works my show, the Will Cain Show. He works Stephen A. Smith Show. Cerruti works the Will Cain Show. We keep talking sports into the commercial breaks. And what's funny is everybody tries to see, what's your real motive? What are you really talking about here? Like me asking the question, when could Saquon Barkley really see, hey, my value is X and I'm getting paid Y? And when will running backs push up the renegotiation period? And Nuno and New York Giant fans like, get out of here. You're just trying to sow division in New York. Get out of here. Meanwhile, I'm like, if Dak signed like a deal like Carson Wentz, I'd be happy. And I'm being told, but he won't. He won't sign a deal like Carson Wentz. No, he wants to be the highest paid. I'm like, no, he's not. Well, we're not. I'm not just wishing ill on another fan base by saying Saquon Barkley might want a new contract. But you are wishing ill on the Cowboys by making sure Dak tries to get paid like Aaron Rodgers. Let's go to the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Jack in Idaho. What's up, Jack? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Well, how's it going?
What's up, man?
All right, so I just want to make it very subtle, but honestly, I think Zeke should get paid first, not that. I just think that, look at the 2017 season, I think Zeke was a big impact on the Cowboys. Suspended 6 games, and it just fell through the cracks with them.
What was that last thing? Do we have to dump that? Really? I think that was a questionable call. Jack was cruising right along. I can't believe he would have landed it with just an expletive towards the Raiders. He was having like a nice, cordial conversation about whether or not you pay Dak Prescott or Zeke Elliott first. Do you think that his landing on that triple Lindy would have been an expletive the Raiders? We had to dump that because that's what it sounded like. You always pay the quarterback over the running back. Always. Always. If it's even close, pay the quarterback over the running back. Tim in Kansas City. What's up, Tim? You're on the Stephen A. Smith Show with Will Cain.
Well, buddy, I wanted to correct you on
One
something.
other thing really quick, Tim. One other thing. Like, why would he have hated the Raiders? He was talking up the Cowboys. Why would he want to stick the landing with a expletive the Raiders? That's a weird, emotion to have. If he'd said Eagles, then I would have got it. Raiders are who you're supposed to hate, Tim, right? You're a Chiefs fan.
We do. We do.
Hey, Tim, do you hate the Broncos, the Raiders, or the Chargers the most? As Chiefs fans, who do you hate the most?
The Raiders.
Okay. All right. Go.
And despise them.
Despise them. Okay.
And
don't cuss, okay?
And ever since anyway, but anyway, you're really a smart guy, and you know your limitations. Zach Prescott is not one of the 4th best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's in the top 15, but he's not in the top 5 or 10.
He's top 10. Whoa. I agree with you. I don't think I've ever put him in either of those categories. Right now, I have Dak about 12th, Tim, with, I think by the end of this season, he'll be in the top 10.
Well, you said one time it was the 4th. I watch it.
What?
And I'm an old man with cancer that lays in bed and watches everything there is about football. But so you said he was number 4.
Well, I need the tape on that.
He's not number 4. He's not number 6. He's in the top 15. But having said that, I want to get back to the Chiefs. The Chiefs have improved their defense, and last year it was the defense that cost the Chiefs. It wasn't the offense.
Right.
The offense was just wonderful. But they've improved the Chiefs. They got rid of Dee Ford. They got rid of Justin Houston. Justin Houston was good at one time. Dee Ford was only good.
I got you, Tim. I'm sorry. I'm running out of time. I got to say, if you missed any of today's show, go check it out on demand in the Stephen A. Smith podcast, brought to you by the Capital One Venture Card. Earn unlimited double miles on every purchase every day. What's in your wallet?